The Pokemon in the background are far cuter than the thing I'm going to be talking about today. But they're electric, so they're applicable to the video. So, today I am going to be talking about Enel, God Enel, however you want to put it. I go back and forth on the names because I've seen it both ways. From One Piece, and this is going to be the next video for the gods or rulers and leaders of One Piece, and God is applicable considering the fact that Enel fancies himself a god, even though he's not, which will be discussed in the video. So I have a Jolteon. I was trying to think of like what is my favorite evolution, and I'm like, I don't know. I like all of them. You go there. Stay. There we go. The basket is full of Pika clones. So time to talk about Skypiea a little bit more. And Enel. So, in regards to this, I was going to do some general information about Skypiea first, kind of like what I did with Alabasta. So, Skypiea is, of course, a sky island that is located in the sky above Paradise, generally within the area of Jaya. Although I'm sure it probably, just because of how the clouds shift around, it moves a little bit from area to area. General information, the people there, the people that reside there have small wings on their back, similar to, stereotypical angels and stuff like that. So we see that with Connis and her father, and with a good chunk of the rest of the population, very few being, there's a few exceptions, and I'll get to those. And of course, a good chunk of their, society is based around, using the island clouds to be able to make things, and of course having dials. And being able to use the different types of dials as well. And we see pretty much all of the different priests that Enel has, including Enel himself, use the dials to very great effect. And of course, later on, we know that Usopp gets a bunch of them, and he uses them later on. We haven't seen him use them as much recently, but I am assuming that he still has a lot of the dials, and he still knows how to use a lot of them, so that'll be good. That might come up later or whatever. I wonder if Vegapunk knows about dials. I would assume he knows some bits about dials, but, we'll see. And they're, of course, up about, 10,000 or something feet above the blue sea, and then there's the blue sea and the white sea and the white sea. So all of that fun stuff. There are, of course, other sky islands, Bierka being one of them, and Witheria is another sky island. There's also the balloon terminal. So we've seen several different sky islands, because we know that the sky islands, the island clouds, are made out of pyrobrine, which is, generally what is produced when there is evaporation from the ocean involving the sea stone. So considering the fact that a good chunk of sea stone actually can be found in Wano, you would think there might be like a sky island near Wano, but I don't know. We'll have to see if that ever ends up becoming an applicable thing or not. We'll have to see. I don't know. The type of the type of money that they use there are called X-Toll, and those are actually worth 10,000 X-Toll is worth like one berry, so there's that. We also know that soil or earth, or Verth as it's called, is very, very important and revered within Skypiea. From what we hear from, I believe it is from Gonfall. I rewatched the episode of Skypiea, or the Sky Island Adventure that they had. That's the retelling of Skypiea with a good chunk of bits cut out of it, including some of my favorite bits with Connis, but moving on. So I've got a lot of that stuff fresh in my head in regards to like Enel's personality and Gonfall's personality for when I do Gonfall's video. And what ends up happening is, of course, generally it is, Gonfall had explained that, on the island clouds. They don't really have a whole lot of earth, and they tend to be pretty fascinated by different things that get shot up in the knock-up stream. And we know that different ships have been shot up in the knock-up stream as well, not just the Thousand Sunny or the Oro Jackson, as we saw back with the Roger flashback with Odin and everything. But, we saw that, there's the St. Brice that gets sent up there. That's the ship that falls on top of the Straw Hats. And there's other ships and other, whole islands in the case of, Jaya that gets shot up there. So we know that stuff tends to end up within the clouds, within the island clouds, and that the people of Skypiea are very interested in them. We know that they do share, of course, the history with the Shandorians and the Bjerkins, with them all coming from the moon originally, and the Shandorians being the only ones to actually make it down to the Blue Sea. That's not really mentioned too much, and given the fact that I don't think these three different cultures actually know about this connection, because Eneru is the one that finds out about it later on when he's up on the moon. So there's not, they don't necessarily know a whole lot about this connection. Some more general information. The island is, of course, named Skypiea. Their current god is Gonfall, but I will be talking about their former god, Enel. And we, of course, there's important people, then I have former important people. So for currently, the important people would be like the other gods' knights, or the gods' guards is what they're referred to as now, which is Wiper and his group. But when Enel was god, his important people, or as I listed here, them former important people, had Om and Garatsu and Shura and Satri and Yama and the divine soldiers. Who did I miss? Yeah, no, that was it. And then, of course, all the rest of the divine soldiers and their commanders and stuff like that. They don't really have an affiliation with anybody. They don't have an affiliation with the world government or anything like that. They certainly don't have any, representation at Reverie or anything like that. I would say probably the closest thing they have to an affiliation would be with the Straw Hats, and even then it's well, yeah, they saved us, and I'm sure that if they asked for help, they would probably give help, given that the Straw Hats helped them, with their issue with Enel. But there's not too much else there. They do have a poneglyph. It's within the Shandorian Golden Belfry Bell. It's, underneath that is where that poneglyph is. And then, of course, we have, we don't actually know the population set up for Skypiea, which at this point in time would include both the Skypeans and the Shandorians. So I don't, it's there's the question of any other Bjerkins that may have ended up there after everything happens with Eneru, but not sure. Moving into Enel himself, as I said, I go back and forth because he's also been called Eneru at times in regards to certain localizations of his name. So Enel is the former very tyrannical god of Skypiea, and as god of Skypiea, he basically had full control of the island. And upper yard and everything else. And we see the amount of fear that the people of Skypiea have in him. The Shandorians, not so much, because they're just he's just like any other god that we've had to deal with in the past from the Skypeans, and we're just going to do what we can to try to get past him and stuff. He's responsible for the destruction of Bjerka. He has the Goro Goro no Mungi, or the Rumble Rumble fruit, making him a Logia, which that combined with his mantra / observation hockey, is what helps him with his god complex, which I'll get into. And he and his followers, who were his god's army, his priest, his vassals, however you want to put it, and I'll go over them a little bit more later on. They, of course, they dethroned Gonfall, about 6 years ago, I believe. Well, it would have been 8 years ago in the current timeline of the story, but they overthrew Gonfall, and then Eneru became, God. Gonfal's or Eneru's personality, as I stated, is very much holier than thou, high and mighty, tyrannical, god complex, above everything, however you want to put it. I will lord over whatever. Very narcissistic and everything. Um, Most of those are descriptions they use throughout the course of the description of his personality, anyway, on the Wikipedia for it. He also is very, childish and arrogant and, without a care in the world, all because he has his, he's a Logia, and unless someone with hockey shows up, he's not really going to have an issue with that. There's not really anyone that he just can't destroy by, electrocuting them to all get out. You know, barring one laughable rubber boy that shows up. Some of the quotes that we get from Enel are one of the times when he's fighting Luffy. Luffy's like, so being God means you can take anything you want? Enel, that's right. Life and earth belong to me. Now I shall take your life as well. So, as I stated, he's very arrogant. Another one that he has is people do not fear God, fear itself is God. Again, he feeds off of the fact that, like, because of his mantra and such, he's able to, in his, probably Logia powers with electricity and sensing stuff like that, is able to help just heighten his mantra even more. He uses that to be able to track if anybody on Skypiea itself is causing any problems in regards to, like, taking his name in vain, because we see how terrified anybody is whenever they think about criticizing Enel, and how they just start, they'll just, like, do anything to try to not make him angry. We also, given the fact that he has no qualms about killing thousands of people, he doesn't care that he has enslaved, Gonfal's former God's army and stuff, and use them to make the Maxim. He doesn't care if any of his priests survive. The whole Skypiea Upper Yard death game that he sets up. He does not care about all the people that he killed on Bierka, so many years ago. He does not care about the fact that he is intending to basically destroy the Skypeans and the Shandians after he, on his way after he leaves, with the Maxim and everything. That, he is literally the embodiment of that type of, narcissistic God complex, of like, oh, I will do whatever I want because it pleases me, and I don't care what it does to anybody else because they do not matter. They have not proven themselves that they matter. He had respect for his priests because they had proven that they were strong, but by the end of it, because each of them had gotten beat by different Straw Hats or by one of the other Skypeans or Gonfall, or the Shandians or Gonfall, he's like, oh, well, I guess you guys are just, not all that interesting. I guess my priests weren't as strong as I thought they were since they were able to be beaten by you guys. So, hey, you guys want to come with me? He does express at times that he was somewhat impressed the fact that Robin could read the stuff written on the different poneglyphs or written on the different writings, for the different writings around Skypiea. He was impressed with that, but he still didn't care. He even falls asleep in the middle of his fight with Kamakiri, the one that, like, stabbed him through the head with the spear. He even, like, falls asleep in the middle of that to, like, prove his immortality and superiority and everything. And then, of course, there's, when he tries to electrocute Luffy and it doesn't work, and he tries again and it doesn't work, and he tries again and it doesn't work, and then, of course, we have the Eneru face. I just love that. That was great seeing that in the movie again. I'm like, yep. And then I showed my mom that picture and she's like, ha ha. So yeah. So we have all of that. Moving into Enel's past, which some of this I already touched on, but a little more in detail. First, for reference, Eneru is 39 currently, so he's 37 when the major events of Skypiea happen. So I think that actually makes him on the older side of some of the different villains that or antagonists that the Straw Hats have fought. Well, no, that actually puts him right. Well, that puts him at the same age as what, Buggy and Shanks, and maybe some of the others. Um, but so going into this, um, Enel is born and raised on Bierka, and at some point in time, he ended up finding and eating the Goro Goro no Mi, and that, that combined with the fact that he ended up having mantra, that he developed that or awakened that at some point in time, um, his observation hockey, that he is able to use that. And the fact that he's a Logia and that hockey, I mean, like, I'm sure hockey exists within the Skypean, like the Skypeans and the Shandians could learn hockey because it's stated that anyone can learn hockey, but there's not really anyone up there that seems to be able to demonstrate the ability of having hockey in regards to like armament hockey. They show that several of them have the ability to do observation hockey with the mantra, because Isa can do that as well, and Eneru and all of his priests can do it, and I think a couple of the other like head guards and head people within his army can use that, but it's a very rare thing even up there. But like, yeah, if they showed up now, if like Eneru showed up now and tried to fight against Luffy, Luffy would still be immune to the electricity anyway. But like, given Luffy's hockey level at this point in time, he would just pummel Enel to all get out, even with Enel having his mantra anyway. It's like, I'm pretty sure like Zoro could take him out now. Same thing with Sanji and stuff like that. Given what they know. So he then at some point, he gathers up his different priests. He, gathers up Om and Garatsu and Shura and Hattori, Satri, whichever one it is. Weird fat floaty ball guy. I don't remember. I don't care. He gathers up them because I guess they've proven themselves, and he gathers up some of the other Bjerkins that I guess had been his loyal followers. And he ends up, then he just ends up destroying, using his powers to destroy Bjerka because I guess he's lost interest in it. He's like done whatever he can there. There's no one else there for him to beat, so he just destroys it. There's theories that like Arouge, Mad Monk Arouge, is a Bjerkin, given the fact that he has wings and they look very similar. And I would buy that. And I would buy that maybe he has a connection to Eneru, to Enel, given that, but I'm not sure. And then sometime before, 8 years before the storyline happened, Enel showed up, for about 8 years, or for a couple of years, they wandered around, and then they ended up coming to Skypiea, and they made their way to where Gonfall was, and Gonfall was the current god at the time. Eneru and his priests show up, and they just slaughter, massacre, whatever, defeat into the ground Gonfall and his group. He, all of his soldiers and stuff like that. They just take them down and defeat them. And Gonfall is, knocked off from, is thrown off from being god and everything. And Enel takes up that status. And he becomes a much more tyrannical god of Skypiea, probably causing a lot more problems for the Shandians, causing a lot of issues for the Skypeans. And he then spends the next 6 years, having Gonfall's former subordinates, work on building the Maxim. We also know that he tends to gather up a lot of the gold that was within the city of Shandora that's there, and using that to help build the Maxim, and also just for his own pleasure of having gold. Because, of course, we find out that his intention is to be able to leave Skypiea, and after he destroys it, go to the Fairyverse, go to the moon. Because that's the endless verse. That is where I belong as a god. And, that's his intention. I do have to admit the Maxim is a very awesome looking ship. I don't remember if we ever get an explanation as to where he found the information on how to build the Maxim, or if that was something that he developed on his own. I know that there's a lot of thoughts that people think that there's a connection between like the Maxim and Uranus, as in like the sky weapon. That maybe there's a connection there. That maybe Enel found some form of plans about that, and he used that to help build the Maxim or something, which is a possibility. And I'd be okay if they wanted to make that part of it, that maybe some point in time there was a connection there. And that would be why Enel wants to go to the fairy birth, because he thinks that that's where he should be as a god. Then we enter the main storyline with the Skypiea arc and the Straw Hats and everything. So he is able to sense that there are, of course, when people are doing what they're not supposed to. He's able to sense when there is someone who takes illegally steps into Upper Yard, and there's just this random man that shows up in Upper Yard. I don't remember if we get an exact explanation as to how he got there, but he ends up there. And Enel just basically unleashes a massive thunderbolt that then just destroys the guy. I don't think we ever find out if that guy's alive or not. I'm going to assume not. And later he is able to, sense when Luffy and Usopp and Sanji are talking with Connis about Angel Island and everything. We know that the Straw Hats, there's a lot more of what happens in the Skypiea arc than what's just in like episode of Skypiea, obviously. But a good chunk of what Enel is capable of is shown within, the movie. So he is able to sense a lot of that stuff, and he ends up then being like, okay, let's just bring them and their ship to the sacrificial altar and everything, and sends off his giant lobster thing to go and get them and drag the ship back. And of course, the Straw Hats have to deal with Satri, and they deal with him pretty quickly. Luffy and Usopp and Sanji are able to deal with him. And then, the rest of the crew have gone off to go and try to get the Mary back, or they were on the Mary when everything happened, so they're following that. And, there's this whole setup where it's just like, Enel shows up at one point in time, and he's, after his, several of his priests get defeated, he shows up at the Thousand Sunny. And he's like looking at them. Well, first we have it that like we have this whole conversation between him and several of his priests at the god's shrine, at where Enel basically spends most of his time, where he's eating an apple. And of course we know that one of the other things that demonstrates his superiority is that, unlike other Skypeans or Bjerkans, he has ripped off his own wings and he's put those drum arch thing on his back. And, to make himself look more like a god, and he put those on his back. So he's, able to demonstrate that. The rest of the priests all still have their wings. But Enel does not. And it's just a way of like distinguishing himself, because, as humans, the way that we look at angels, or the way we look at gods, is, okay, well, for angels, we tend to depict them or picture them as having, wings and stuff like that, and being messengers of God. Whereas with Enel, he's like, oh, everybody else around me has these wings. To distinguish myself, rips off his own wings and puts in the thunder drum things that he has. So, man has issues, but we knew that. So basically, throughout the course of, the arc, Luffy and the others are working their way through Upper Yard, trying to get to where Enel is and everything, because they want to get to where, Shandora is and get to the Golden Bell, because Luffy wants to ring the bell because of cricket. Cue cricket noises. I don't have cricket noises. And what ends up happening from there is, of course, Enel shows up at one point on Going Merry. Excuse me. If I said Thousand Sunny earlier, I meant Going Merry. Although Frankie would love to get to design an actual ship that would go up to the Sky Island. He would adore that. He would love getting to do that. But he shows up at the Going Merry, and, he ends up fighting. He ends up kind of causing issue with Gonfall, but he also ends up taunting Nami and Kanis, and he knocks out Sanji and Usopp. And he's like, okay, and he explains to them his death game, Skypiea Upper Yard death game. And of course, also during a whole bunch of this stuff, he's having to deal with the Shandians that have been invading Upper Yard. He ends up fighting against Kamakiri, as I said. And this is when he gets, as I said, stabbed through the head with his with Kamakiri's, spear, and it doesn't do anything. And Enel just, knocks him out eventually. And he also does this one point in time during the whole big fight and everything that's going on within Upper Yard. He basically just ends up releasing like this huge amount of electricity that just goes throughout the entire section and knocks out a whole bunch of the different competitors that are there, including some of his own men, his own subordinates, and the Shandians and stuff like that, just getting them all knocked out. Because he's like, oh, I picture that by the end of this, there'll be 5 survivors left, including myself. So, and then by the end of it, he's like, okay, there's like 1 extra. And like before they're done, he like, knocks that person out. So, we just see him demonstrating his arrogance again and again and again. Knocking out the Shandorians and even his own men. And he even goes through and like after everything's built for the arc, he ends up electrocuting a bunch of his own men that work for him anyway, including a bunch of the ones that had worked for Gonfall, and including a bunch of the own servants that had shown loyalty to Enel at this point in time. He knocks them out because he doesn't see them as worthy as coming with him to the Fairyverse. And, he, when he arrives at the, at the Shandora ruins, he's, talking with Robin, and he is impressed that she's able to read the words. And he ends up finding out about like the golden bell and everything, and Robin mentioned something, and he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get the golden bell then, is his intention. Then of course this is when Zoro and Robin and Gonfall and Wiper are all now having to face down against Enel. And, they're like, they're all just, they're all ready to fight him. And at this point in time, if Zoro had access to Haki, Enel would be dead. Enel would just be, nope, I'm just going to end you now. I don't care. I have Haki and you're going to end very quickly. If he had his armament Haki at that point in time. But Enel is just able to, he knocks out, he knocks out Gonfall first, and then he knocks out Robin, and then he knocks out Zoro, and then he also ends up knocking out Wiper. And Wiper actually gets some pretty good attacks in because he has his impact dial, or the reject dial, whichever one that he has, it's like strapped to his arm, and he has his own bazooka, of course. And he's using those against Enel. And he has, Wiper has his, they're like the ski things that he has that are actually made out of sea prism stone. And when he uses the reject dial on Enel, he actually has it that the skis are actually like touching Enel. So Enel cannot go intangible. He cannot use his powers at that point in time because he's being touched by sea prism stone. And, Enel is, attacked, experiences a great amount of damage to his body by the power from the reject dial that Wiper had. But unfortunately, this of course just results in, he seems to fall, he seems to die, but he's able to, because his powers, he's able to like jumpstart his heart again and wake up again, and then he just knocks out Wiper and any of the others that are there. And then he then takes Nami and takes her into where the Arc Maxim is. Now, by technicality, by the way, I love Wiper. He's great. By technicality, had, Wiper just basically stood there and like held his ski things down on Eneru for like a couple of minutes or something like that. Powers or not, I don't think Eneru would have been able to come back. Or since we don't know the exact rules for like how it is when someone dies, we know that if someone with a devil fruit dies, their power leaves them and the devil fruit power gets reincarnated in a different fruit and the fruit is reborn. So there's that. But, and I know fanfics have gone into this and stuff like that, but I don't know if anyone's actually asked Oda that, okay, well, if someone with a devil fruit power is, knocked out to the point, sustains enough damage to the point where they actually like die, like you die on the operating table and they're able to bring you back, if you die in that time frame, what happens to your devil fruit? Does it like leave you and you no longer have a devil fruit power when you wake back up again? Or do you still have your power? We know that Luffy got, side note here, we know that Luffy got knocked out a bunch of times during his fights with Kaido and everything like that on the roof and everything. And we, that's about to get kind of concluded with stuff like that. We're going to see some of that stuff in the anime soon. So we know that Luffy got knocked out a bunch there, but none of those times he actually died. Even when he gets knocked out on the roof again by Kaido before he awakens to Gear 5th, I don't think that there's ever a time where Luffy like 100% actually dies and then like comes back. So had it been that like Enel had actually been like out long enough that he'd actually died on the operating table type of a thing, and then his power does bring him back. But the thing is that if his power leaves it can't bring him back. So he'd be dead anyway, if that was the case. So basically what ends up happening from there is, of course, Enel goes into the Arc Maxim and he shows the Arc Maxim to Nami because, of course, his whole ego will not let him just leave. It's like, dude, if you literally just didn't set up this whole Skypiea death game and just got in your Arc Maxim and left, you probably would have won in all honesty. But you didn't because your arrogance won't let you. Your arrogance and your boredom with everything, and makes it that he wanted to have the Skypiea death game, wanted to see how many people he could take out or how many people his subordinates could take out before he's able to leave and cause all of this chaos and draw everybody's attention away from him leaving and everything like that. So then he could release his power and destroy everybody on Skypiea and Shandia and everything like that. Well, everybody except Luffy, because Luffy's rubber and it wouldn't have affected them, and then Luffy would have just gone off on a giant revenge path against Enel anyway. So that wouldn't have gone well either. There's a what if there. But so there's a lot of stuff that happens there, but Enel has to have someone there for him to brag to about the Maxim, and that's why he takes Nami with him, because he needs someone to brag to. And of course, Luffy shows up, very shortly after that, and Luffy starts, Enel tries to attack Luffy, and it doesn't do anything. He tries 10,000 volts, 1 million, 20 million, whatever volts attack that go through Luffy, and nothing works. Nothing is able to get through Luffy. Nothing is able to actually cause Luffy any damage. Luffy has damage on his clothes, but that's not from the electricity. That's from running around inside of the giant snake for several hours, instead of Nola for several hours. So, and Luffy is just somewhat baffled by this as well at first. And Nami is, I think, the one that figures it out, because Luffy is rubber. He's immune to this. He's immune to electricity. Therefore, it shouldn't bother him or anything like that. And Luffy is able to kind of figure this out too. And then he just ends up, starting to attack Enel. And he's, Luffy doesn't need Haki to actually fight Enel. He just kicks him in the gut. And Enel is Enel kind of has it happen because he's just still so baffled by the fact that Luffy is actually immune to his powers. And even if Enel did try to go intangible to try to, avoid Luffy's attack, Luffy still attacked him and he's still made of rubber. So it still hurt. And Luffy's able to get a couple of hits in, and then Enel just starts using his mantra to, predict where Luffy's attacks are going to be, and he keeps dodging them or blocking them or whatever. And he eventually is able to just end up, using his electric power to melt a bunch of the gold and then put the gold onto Luffy. And that's what, Luffy's one of his fists, I don't remember which one. I don't remember if his right arm or his left arm, with left hand or right hand, gets, the giant ball of gold on it, and then Luffy gets knocked off the ship. And then, Enel at some point in time during this time frame has revealed his plan that he intends to, destroy Skypiea anyway. And during this time frame, Connis, love Connis, she's best girl in a lot of cases. She goes and tries to, get everybody within, Angel Island to listen to her, so that way she can get everybody out of there, so that way they're all safe and they're not going to get destroyed when Enel sends down his giant electric, thunderbolts and lightning bolts and everything like that to destroy all of them. So Connis is off being amazing. Connis is going to get her own video at some point in time. I don't know when, but Connis is going to get her own video at some point. Not this week. I have way too much else going on this week to do anything for that. But what ends up happening is, of course, Nami ends up standing up to Enel, and she kind of holds her own for a little bit because she's got her, her very good sense in regards to weather and stuff like that, and she has her climb attack. Slightly upgraded climb attack from Alabasta. Not by much. She doesn't have the dials yet, but she's got a little bit of an upgraded climb attack, so she's able to do a little bit better, and she's able to help, block some of Enel's lightning that he sends at her and everything. And during this time frame, Sanji and Usopp have, snuck their way onto the Arc Maxim in order to save Nami. Sanji also spends some time getting, some of the equipment inside of it, the engines and stuff like that, instead of the Arc Maxim getting to the point where they're going to stall out soon. And, throughout this time frame, Gonfall is involved in some of this, because I know at some point when Nami falls, Gonfall actually catches her. So we know Gonfall's not dead anyway. But Sanji and Usopp show up, and they're trying to get get Nami out of there and try to do something to stop the Maxim so Enel can't escape. And of course, Enel, he electrocutes Usopp and electrocutes Sanji and sends them off, and so much in that regard, knocks them off the ship and everything, or they're able to escape. Or Usopp actually saves Sanji, so they're able to escape that way. Then Enel just goes and restarts the Maxim and gets it running again. And, Connis has managed to get everybody off of Angel Island, and the Skypiea, the Shandians have also managed to leave their village and everything like that, because they were given warning. And they're able to, or they got warning to them somehow, and they're able to escape as well. And then we actually see the two groups working together to try to escape and get to safety, so they're not going to be destroyed. And Enel at this point in time is just kind of much more distracted by what's going on with Luffy and everything else, and his goal has shifted slightly. He wants to go and find the giant golden belfry and everything, because he wants to have that for his collection, I guess. Gold! And so he's trying to get to that on top of Giant Jack. And during this time frame, Luffy and Nami have, of course, made their way up the, beanstalk again, and they're, Luffy has used his power, used the golden ball on his arm to act as a conductor to actually absorb a bunch of the volts of electricity that Eneru is using against him, that Enel uses against Luffy, to absorb a bunch of that and then hit Enel with it himself. And uses that to be able to then defeat Enel, and he, punches through Enel and rings the bell and everything. And, so that, Enel is defeated in that regard. And yes, I mean, at that point in time, Enel probably has had a giant amount, come down several pegs on his god complex, but he still has the god complex. And this is where we leave Enel in the actual anime, is that he actually is able to, he's just screw the bell, I'm just going to get on the Maxim and I'm going to go to the Fairyverse. And that's where he goes. He heads off toward the moon. In the arc, and he just like, screw it. He did send down the giant he did send down the giant waves of electricity crashing down onto Skypiea and Shandia as well. In that regard, in regards to an attempt to try to destroy anybody that was there. So there is that. We also have these great conversations between Luffy and Enel where it's just like, and now it just makes it even funnier because, given context that we have now in the series with the fact that, Enel sees himself as a guy that is as a human that is a god. Luffy is a human that actually is a god, and the fact that he is, has the Nika devil fruit and everything. But he still views himself as human. Luffy does not see himself as like above other people in that regard just because of his power or anything along those lines. Enel is this representation of the god complex and everything. And I guess Enel is kind of a little bit of like our first taste of what the celestial dragons will end up being later on. Given that they all have god complexes as well, or a good chunk of them have god complexes as well. So Enel heads off toward the moon, toward the fairy birth. And then, of course, this is where we have his cover page series, which is, of course, Enel's great space operations. And this results in him, getting to the moon, finding the automata, saving them from the space pirates, Fox space pirates that are there. And then, reading about the history of the different sky races and everything. And uses his power to awaken all of these different automata, and by the end of it he basically has like his own little automata army and everything on the moon. So I guess that's been so long ago, and we don't know if Enel is going to show back up in the story or anything like that, so we'll see how long he finds it entertaining to be on the moon. And then a little bit here in regards to like Enel's God's army, as he calls it. They all have like different names for what all the different gods have different names for what they call their different subordinates. So Enel has God's army, which is a group of Bjerkans and Skypeans on Upper Yard that serve him. The main body of that are his priests or his vassals or his, God's vessels or Sky Knights or however you want to refer to them. And those are his four main priests, so that's Om, Satori, Gadatsu, and Shura. I have all of them. And of course, Om has his dog, and Shura has his bird. And of course, then underneath them, there are the Divine Soldiers that are 50 warriors called the Divine Soldiers that fight under Yama. And this also includes Hattori and Kotori. Hotori and Kotori, they're the annoying two brothers. And a bunch of these ones all kind of look like goat men. And then there is the Divine Squad, which is 650 members. And several of them were former servants or former subordinates of Gonfall, and they were used to, they were forced into enslavement to build the Arc Maxim. I'm recording this the weekend before the 4th of July, and you may have just heard a firework go off in the background. It is the morning. Why are you setting off fireworks now? And then we have the White Berets, who are led by McKinley, and we don't really see them at all in episode of Skypiea, but they are they are kind of an integral part in getting everybody off of the islands and everything like that during the actual Skypiea arc, getting everybody off of Skypiea at Angel Island and everything. And they basically act as like police. The White Berets kind of act as like the white tees version of like the Marine, the police, and stuff like that. And they kind of like help with Enel's rule and stuff like that. Although they probably it stated or it showed that they only obey Enel for the sake of the protection of the people of Skypiea, because they want to protect the people, because that was their job beforehand when they served under Gonfall, and now they just want to be able to protect them from Enel as much as possible. So we have that. They're like a police force, basically, as I said. So And I'll talk a little bit about some of those groups a little bit more when I talk about Gonfall in the next video for this. So that's what I have there. I had debated at one point if I wanted to name any of my electric Pokemon in any of my games Enel, but I'm like, nope, because I don't like Enel, and I don't particularly tend to like naming Pokemon after characters that I don't like for the most part. So that's what we have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.